Hi everyone, it's Gillian from Hooked and Smithen. Welcome to my channel. For today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to crochet this puff stitch hexagon. This is the front of the pattern and this is the back. I made this using a finger weight yarn, and you can make this using whatever yarn you use. You might have to make your puff stitch less, like I did 5 into the stitch to make the puff stitch. If you have a bigger yarn, you might want to do less. Okay, so let's get started. To begin, you're going to make a magic ring. You're going to chain 3, and inside that magic ring you're going to make a total of 6 puff stitches with a chain 2 in between. To make your first puff stitch, you're going to wrap your hook and go into the ring a total of 5 times. That's 3 loops on your hook, 5 loops on the hook, 7 loops on the hook, 9 loops on the hook, and 11 loops on the hook. And you're going to wrap your hook and pull through all 11 loops. You're going to chain 2. Wrap your hook and go into the ring 5 times. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wrap your hook and pull through all 11 loops. Chain 2. Wrap your hook going into the ring. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wrap your hook and pull through all 11 loops. Chain 2. Now go ahead and make 3 more puff stitches, and I'll meet you at the end to start a new row. At the end you should have a total of 6 puff stitches. You're going to make your final chain 2, and then you're going to slip stitch at the top, and that is the end of round 1. You're going to start round 2 by making a slip stitch into the first chain 2 space. You're going to chain 3, and into the chain 2 space, we're going to be only walking into the chain 2 space. You're going to make a V puff stitch, and to do that you're going to wrap your hook and go into the stitch 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're going to pull through all loops. You're going to chain 2, and then you're going to make another puff stitch into that same chain 2 space, and that's a V puff stitch. That's 2, 3, 4, 5. And you're now going to chain 1, and walking into the next chain 2 space, you're going to do the very same thing that you did in the first space. You're going to make a V puff stitch. That's 3, 4, and 5. Chain 2, and make another puff stitch into that chain 2 space. And after the V puff stitch, you're going to chain 1, and you're going to continue that sequence all the way around, and I'll meet you there. After your last V puff stitch, you're going to chain 1, and you're going to slip stitch to the top of the chain 3 area, and you should have a total of 12 puff stitch, and that is the end of round 2. To begin round 3, you're going to start by making a slip stitch into the first chain 2 space. You're going to chain 3 and you're going to make a V stitch into the V stitch, the V puff. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Chain 2 and make another puff stitch into that V puff stitch. 3, 4, 5. Now we're going to chain 1, and into the chain 1 space you're going to make a single puff stitch. Four and 5, and pull through all loops. And you're going to chain 1, and you're going to make another V puff into the V puff. Chain 2 and make another puff stitch into the chain 2. Chain 1 and into the chain 1 space you're going to make a single puff stitch. You're going to chain 1 and you're going to continue that sequence all the way around, and I'll meet you at the end. At the end you have 1 chain 1 space left. You're going to make your last puff stitch in there. You're going to chain 1 and you're going to slip stitch at the top. And that is the end of round 3, and you should have a total of 18 puff stitches. For round 4, you're going to slip stitch into the first chain 2 space. You're going to chain 3 and you're going to make a V puff into the V puff. Chain 2 and make that other V puff, that other puff stitch. You're now going to chain 1, and we have 2 chain 1 space coming up, and we're going to make a single puff stitch into each one of those spaces. You're going to chain 1 and you're going to make another puff stitch into the next chain 1 space. You're going to chain 1, and that is your stitch repeat. V puff stitch, chain 1, single puff stitch, chain 1, single puff stitch, chain 1. You're going to start your repeat all over again by making a V puff. Chain 2, and you're going to make another puff stitch into the chain 2 space. Chain 1, we have those 2 chain 1 space coming up. We're going to make a single puff stitch. Chain 1, chain 1, repeat, and I'll meet you at the end. You have 2 chain 1 space left. You're going to make a puff stitch in each one of those chain 1 space. You're going to chain 1 into the final chain 1 space. You're going to make your last puff stitch. You're going to chain 1 and slip stitch at the top. And at the end of round 4, you should have 24 puff stitch, and you should have a sequence of 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2 all the way around. And that is the end of round 4. To begin round 5, you're going to make a slip stitch into the chain 2 space, chain 3. And into the chain 2 space, the V puff, we're going to make a V puff. Chain 2. And now we're going to chain 1, and we have 3 chain 1 space coming up. We're going to make a single puff into each one of those spaces. You're going to chain 1, chain 1, chain 1, and that is your stitch repeat. V puff, a chain 1, a single puff, a chain 1, another single puff, chain 1, a single puff, and chain 1. Next, you're going to make a V puff into the V puff. This starts to repeat all over again. Chain 2, chain 1, and now you have chain 1 space 3 times, and you're going to make a puff, 1 single puff stitch in each one of those chain 1 space. 2, 3, 4, 5, chain 1. Chain 1. Chain 1, and you're going to repeat that all the way around, and I'll meet you there. At the end, we have 3 chain 1 space left, and we're going to finish it. Chain 1, chain 1, and we have our final chain 1 space. Chain 1, and we're going to slip stitch at the top. And that is the end of round 5. You should have a total of 30 puff stitches. You should have a sequence of 2, 1, 2, 3 single puffs, 2, 1, 2, 3 single puffs. And you should have that all the way around. To begin round 6, you're going to start by making a slip stitch into the chain 2 space. You're going to chain 3 and you're going to make a V puff into the V puff. Chain 2 and put another puff stitch into that chain 2. Chain 1, and you now have 4 chain 1 space, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're going to put a single puff into each one of those spaces. Chain 1, chain 1, chain 1. And you have your last chain 1 space before the V puff. And then chain 1. So your stitch repeat is the V puff stitch and a chain 1 followed by a single puff stitch, a chain 1, a single puff stitch, a chain 1, a single puff stitch, a chain 1, and another puff stitch and a chain 1. So you have 4 puff stitch and a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chain 1s. You're going to start your repeat all over again by making a V puff into the V puff. Chain 2 and make another puff stitch into the chain 2 space. Chain 1. Now you have 4 chain 1 space coming up and you're going to make a single puff stitch into each one of those spaces. Chain 1, chain 1, chain 1, and we have our last chain 1 space before the repeat. We're going to make a single puff stitch there. We're going to chain 1 and we're going to start a repeat all over again, and I'll see you on the other side. At the end you should have 4 chain 1 spaces left, and into each one of those chain 1 spaces you're going to put 1 puff stitch. Chain 1, chain 1, chain 1, and into the last space you're going to put your final puff stitch. And chain 1, and you're going to slip stitch at the top. And that is the end of round 6. You should have 36 puff stitches, and you should have a sequence running of 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way around. So you should have a V stitch followed by 4 single puff stitch. And that's the end. Thank you for visiting my channel. As always, please like and subscribe for more video tutorials.